Welcome back to Fine Margins. Today we are covering the Hungary Grand Prix, which is the final race ahead of the summer break.
The race included a fantastic Max comeback, more Ferrari moments, Mercedes looking as good as they have all year, and another terrific McLaren and Alpine battle.
Yeah, I think the topic that we might as well get away with quickly is Ferrari. I don't know what to say really. They had a 1-2. They had a
2-3.
second 2-3 lineup, and they ended
4th and 6th.
I actually think it's kind of difficult to do that.
Yeah, I mean it's generally harder.
As in, they have the faster car. It was a track with corners, and downforce was the key element, right? And somehow it's not even that they didn't get the win, as in they didn't have one driver on the podium.
It's incredible.
And I'm just thinking, our heads gonna roll? As in, because it wasn't just one mistake or two mistakes, it was everything. They got the tire strategy wrong, right? It was really clear, I think, in this race that starting on the softs, or maybe starting on the mediums, but considering the softs were going as long as the mediums, was the way to go. And then switching to mediums so that you've tried two tire compounds. They didn't not do that. They also went for the hards, even though, like we were talking about this, the Haas, which is the white Ferrari, struggled immensely on the hards at the beginning of the race. They knew this data. The Alpines also struggled on the hards. They knew that too. But they still decided, whilst Max was right behind Leclerc, to bring him in and to put him on hards.
He was ahead of him, Leclerc.
Yeah, but then they said, oh, but we were just trying to cover the undercut. And it's like, but you just gave the position.
Yeah.
And he's super uncomfortable with the setup. So, and that then led them to have to take an extra pit stop. Yeah. So that was, Leclerc's third pit stop.
It's incredible because they were flexible enough, as they had two drivers ahead of Verstappen, that they were flexible with their strategy. So you can try and cover off the undercut with Leclerc while also leaving Sainz out, right? But what's incredible is they got both strategies wrong, because Verstappen ended up being ahead of both of them. You know, you put Leclerc on the hards, which made no sense because every team was struggling on the hards. You know, and even with a max spin, that meant Leclerc could retake the lead whilst Verstappen damaged his tyres.
Yeah, I think that's the thing.
He could still easily overcome Leclerc again, because he had, you know, the poor man had no grip on those tyres. And he just struggled massively, like every team did on the hard compound.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and then it was the slow pit stops, and why they pitted Leclerc before Sainz, it doesn't really make sense. Sainz had the older tyres. You know, it just seemed like every pit stop didn't go to plan. I think there was one semi-decent. It was like 2.6 seconds. The timings at which they brought their drivers in for the pit stop seemed very much like a reaction to either Mercedes or Red Bull, as opposed to like, this is our strategy. And frankly, like, what happened to Carlos? Why was that his positioning at the end?
Well, I think Carlos, though he's been getting much more comfortable in the Ferrari, so he's been much better in qualifying and free practice. I think, firstly, the team, both of them, suffered with a lot of tire degradation this track, which makes it, you know, it's really hard to understand why. Perhaps it was the cold temperature, perhaps it was the nature of the track, because, you know, you go back to Miami, where it was, they suffered from a lot of degradation, and the Red Bulls didn't, so the Red Bulls were able to overtake Leclerc with pole and win, and then suddenly we switched to Austria when it's flipped, you know, where Verstappen has pole, but Leclerc and Ferrari cars have much lower deg, and the tyres can last a lot longer, and that seemed to be the case for the last couple of races. And then we go back into Hungary, and you know, the orders flip. So I think that firstly, that shows that Ferrari and all the other teams, you know, they're still learning, still trying to understand the new tyres, new regulations, you know, the impact it has on deg, you know. But also I think Sainz, in terms of race pace, he has caught up in qualifying, but in terms of race pace, he's not been as fast as Leclerc this year, you know? And I struggled to think of a single race, even Silverstone when he won, you know, Leclerc was the faster car on the day, and it was just, you know, differing strategies that led to Sainz getting that victory. But I think those are probably the major factors.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think the ideal strategy for Ferrari would have been? And not that we're positioned at all to make those kind of calls, but I'm curious to know like how you would have run the strategy in hindsight. It's a tough question.
Well, it is, but
I'll leave that to you.
well, I think because the Ferrari drivers started on the mediums, so they had to change compounds. So ideally, because they were suffering from a lot of degradation, you'd just try and have to extend those 2 medium stints as long as you could, and finish on the softs, and that would probably be the ideal strategy.
So you would have gone through a 3-stop.
You'd have to, because you can't touch the hard, because hard compounds didn't work for anyone. No one could light them up. No one could get grip on them. So you'd have to stick with the mediums, make them last as long as they could. Even with your high degradation. And then finally end it on the softs and try and catch up.
I mean, how many pit stops? Max did 2
Max
stops.
did 2, yeah.
And he did the...
Soft, medium,
Yeah, so he started on
But
the
George,
soft,
so see, George did that. George did soft, medium.
Yeah.
But because of the risk of the Verstappen undercut, he boxed probably earlier than he should have with it in his first sim with the mediums. So his second sim with the mediums, he had to go much longer. That means Hamilton, who then managed to maintain his tyres
for
much longer, got onto the softs with 15, 16 laps remaining, and blitzed past Sainz, Russells, and if there was a couple more laps, could have even caught up to Max.
To Max, yeah. Once again, we just missed out on a Max Hamilton fight.
It'll happen.
It'll happen. It's coming. Like they've slotted P2 and P3 halfway through the season. It means there's another half to go. It's coming. I think that's a nice little segue into Mercedes. So Mercedes this week, look, they've unlocked qualifying pace. Will it happen when we come back? I don't know. I really think at this point, from what they've been saying, they don't fully understand it. But I also think the engineers are kind of like, we told you this car. We told you we didn't need to copy Mercedes or Red Bull. So let's just hope that the kind of learnings there and this progressive thing they've been doing has worked. Then that translated into good race pace today. I think, George and Hamilton were both competitive with the Red Bull and the Ferrari, which usually, right, you just hear Hamilton on the comms being like, I cannot keep up. Like, it's not possible. So that was cool. But, George started first and he ended third. And Hamilton started seventh and he's ended second. So what happened there?
Well, I think firstly, you hope that Mercedes can understand their car after the summer break. Because I think the whole season they've been talking about, like, we've matched teams in terms of pace, And you hope that they'll take that next step. So it's like, we were just the fastest car on track. It's the same thing like last week. They are, like you said, they don't fully understand their car. There were certain parts of the race where you look at Hamilton's performance where, you could look perhaps early in the race, he was in some dirty air, but once he got out of dirty air, it took him a while before he could match Leclerc in terms of lap time when he was leading. And then at the end, he had a stint at the end where he was matching Verstappen in terms of lap time. But, they can't seem to get it consistently.
This week or last week?
Last week.
Okay.
But in terms of today, I think today the biggest theme was tyre management. And George had to take out a lot of his tyres because he had to defend. He had to defend from Leclerc.
Yeah.
And George is a very smart driver. He knows how to position that car. But still, defending is defending, and it takes you off your ideal racing line. You have to park the car in places in parts of the track that you wouldn't want to if you were maximizing.
Whereas
time
Lewis
performance.
was kind of picking himself through the field. George was on the softs, so he was degrading faster as he was defending. And then obviously he did an early change to the mediums, right? Because they were trying to cover Verstappen. I think that makes sense. And then whereas Lewis, I think, had a more predictable race.
He had much more clean air. He didn't have to defend, as much as George did. So he could make those tyres last a little longer. And those Mercedes, they struggle to light up the tyres, but that also, like we said last week, they're really good at maintaining the tyres. They probably
because
their
peak window is much higher threshold than anyone else, and so 100%, totally. I think, look, I think George is a world-class driver.
Love
I
him.
think when you hear him, for example, last week when he had that little stint with Sergio, or this week on that corner, the first corner with Carlos Sainz, he was like, listen, like, these are the regulations. Like, I know the regulations. This was my line. His tire had to be here, X, Y, Z. He knows the stuff. You know, he's not just a driver. He also gets the car. That's also why, like, on those safety car restarts, he is on it so quickly.
He reminds me a little of Vettel, you know, of his intelligence of the game and of his knowledge of the rule book and what you can do and what you can't do. You know, like we saw last week in terms of the safety car restart. We do know that there was news that came out that there was some wrong information that all the teams got, that Sergio got, that they said, I think, the safety car was going to end at turn 9, and it said it was going to end at turn 12, but it was actually supposed to be turn 9. But, you know, George managed he slowed down that car, so it was quite severely under the delta, so he could just rapidly...
he had like a standing start.
You know, have a standing start.
Yeah, and it was similar, but it was similar this week. Like, I don't want to go too much into last week's race because, like, we're talking about this week's race, right? And I think it can get confusing. But basically, it was the same thing. He had a really quick start, and like, even the commentators, the pundits were like, God, he's just gained himself 2 seconds. And it's like, because it's about the fine margins. It's about the fine margins. It's about those little wins that you can get, and he took the most of them. Yeah, I felt for him that he didn't get that win, and I didn't actually understand why he hadn't, or where exactly it had gone wrong, or how, you know, Lewis had managed to catch up. But I do think it actually was a matter of the tires, and also like entry back into the race, and he had a slow pit stop, and that's actually where Verstappen was able to make up that time. So that was that. But I still think, you know,
fantastic
it's
driver.
Coming.
He'll get his
coming.
wins. You know, he's too talented not to.
And then I think, you know, Lewis is just Lewis. Like, Lewis just turns up. He does his thing. You know, he's picking through the field. You didn't see too much with. I mean, you kind of saw a mini replay of him and Alonso, you know, defending against one another at the beginning of this race.
No.
Am I completely?
Yeah, he got past. I think there may be a part in the middle of the track, but he got past Alonso right at the start from them.
No, who was it? Was
Alonso defended Verstappen? Maybe?
Yeah, Alonso defended Verstappen, which seemed. Oh no, that's what it was. Alonso defended Verstappen.
Not as well as he didn't.
I was thinking, okay, like, if this is anything like last year, Verstappen's going to be held up behind the world champion Alonso for like 10 laps or maybe 5. It was 2.
Yeah, I think Alonso.
I was like, is it really because he hates Lewis?
We
like,
love
is that
Fernando,
why?
He's one of the most experienced, one of the smartest, probably one of the pettiest drivers on grid, and you can see that whenever he has Lewis behind him.
He literally
such as
makes
last
his
year,
life awful. Yeah.
Or Monaco this year when he just backed up the whole pack. You know, Lewis and all the. There was like 10 drivers behind him.
Maybe you can say, oh no, it's because the regulations have made it so that the cars can follow each other much easier, and therefore the overtake is simpler. Like, I think
that could also be a case because you went up to this entire Grand Prix, all you heard was, God, it's so hard to overtake a Hungary. It's so hard to overtake a Hungary.
Yeah, it's like Monaco. It's a bit.
It's like
less
it's obviously
hard than
you know it's a bit more spacious. It is a circuit. You know, you have. The straights are a little longer, but you know everyone kept saying that, and you know obviously it is still very difficult to overtake at a Monaco compared to something like a Canadian Grand Prix or something. But I think this gives a positive indication that perhaps the regulations have really aided racing, and you can just see how easy it is for cars to follow each other. You know, especially since you look at pole positions this year. You know, Leclerc has had 7 poles. Russell's had a pole. You know, Verstappen's had I think 1 pole in Austria. You know, where they haven't converted that to a win. You know, which you know just means that your starting grid position isn't as important. It's just how you perform on the race and how fast your car is.
Yeah, it's all up for grabs, 100%. And then we come to Red Bull. Look, I'm going to give credit to Red Bull, right? Talk about making
fantastic weekend.
Yeah, talk about making the most of a bad situation. You know, you've got your drivers starting P10 and P11, and you're ending in P1 and
P5.
I mean, okay, and there was a little mistake. Max had a spin, but their pit stops were so quick.
Sharp, man.
They've always
been good at
like
that,
0.4 of a second faster or a full second faster
Yeah.
than other teams. And I think for me, like, that's just execution. That's just practice and
preparation.
execution.
Yeah.
Their strategy was aggressive and demanding, and they stuck to what
Yeah.
they knew. You know, it's almost like they were a few steps ahead.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Verstappen, when he's driving, he's driving. So there's
He's-
not really
he's
much to
just-
say.
He's you know, he's a very talented
Yeah.
driver, and you could see that.
Yeah.
You know, him and Perez from the start,
Yeah.
they just, you know, suddenly they gain like 3-4 places,
Yeah.
you know, and
Yeah.
he picks his way through the field. It just all seems very, it honestly, he makes it look like it's
He
really easy.
seems chilling. But the thing is like, you know, I don't know, does it look so easy because Ferrari are making it easy? Or,
Well, that's,
you
yeah.
know, because I do think, like, without a doubt, Red Bull are a great team. But I'm almost like, you know, is it even easier? Is it even simpler to make
Yeah.
those decisions? Because Ferrari don't
Well, yeah,
just mess
there's
up on one side, they mess up on all sides. So,
And there's a lot, I think there's a lot less pressure, because I mean, obviously Red Bull are very, you know, they have championship experience from obviously the
Yeah.
Vettel days, and
Yeah.
it's still a lot of the same key
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
You know, Horner's still in charge. You know, Adrian Newey is still there, and I'm sure it's a lot of the same people in the background.
Yeah.
You know, and on top of that, they got the whole year last year where
Yeah.
you know, and I think last year probably gives them so much more experience into this year, because it was every race was a pressure moment last year. You know,
Yeah,
because you're going up against the best of
it's
the best.
probably that. It's like they're probably less
You know?
stressed. I mean, look, I personally don't love the Red Bull culture. I think, yeah, Sergio has had 2 weekends where he's not been to the level he usually is. He's off the pace versus Max, but I think Helmut, you know, immediately going to the press, and many different quotes were taken of him being, I don't know, just unnecessarily degrading of it, and as though this is some massive issue, and as though Sergio's not performing for the
Offensive.
team. Like, it's not that, you know, I mean, look at how Valtteri and Lewis were when they were together. There was a gap. Look at Lando and Ricardo, and
There's
you
a
don't
gap.
get other.
Well, look at
And he's not even the team principal, but it's a bit like you don't get other people going, and he's like directly attacking
Yeah.
Sergio, and it's a bit like, good luck finding another. No, because if
Because
Sergio
no,
leaves,
we all
they're
know.
in massive trouble.
Like, obviously they have a very talented, you know, junior driver program, but that second seat at Red Bull, ever since Ricardo left and Max became
Yeah.
the guy, has been very difficult to fill, and Sergio has been the most consistent one and the best one, and he's brought out the best results, you know, in terms of you know,
Yeah.
his win at Monaco, his win at Azerbaijan.
Yeah.
He's, you know, more consistently been on the podium.
Uh-huh.
You know, as well as he's a great team player. I mean, you just have to look at the Abu Dhabi race at the end of last year when he was
But this is the
slowing
thing, yeah.
up. You know, but then even like Helmut said at the end after the race last week, even though the information had come out that there was a virtual
Yeah, there was a
safety car
communication error,
mistake,
yeah.
you know, and you know, he came out and says, you know, maybe Sergio was on tequila, he was just asleep at the wheel, you know,
Which
and
is just ridiculous. Also, like, he's Latin American, and so you're gonna drop, like, it's, I don't know, like, I'm not a fan, and I think, you know, the comments that came out, and frankly, I'm a bit like, if Christian Horner wants to say
Yeah.
that, fine, whatever,
But I
like,
think,
he's the team principal.
you know,
but,
but I also think on the other side, you know, I think they can then come and say, but you know, that's our culture and it works for us in terms of, you know, doesn't mean you know they're guardian angels and they're you know knights in shining armor, like, you know, like perhaps, you know, the Mercedes team with Lewis, you know, who's very vocal about
I think
such
Sergio should say
but you know
something, like,
they can say, Red Bull, you know, that outside of Mercedes, we've won the most titles in the last 10-15 years. You know, our Helmut is in
Yeah.
charge of the junior driving programs, and it's like you look at, like, half the grid is Red Bull Red Bull junior drivers. You know, his
Yeah.
methods, they seem to bring talented drivers. I'd not say I agree
yeah,
with them,
sure,
and you know,
no, fine.
and how he goes about it, but you know, it seems to bring them, you know,
Yeah.
a certain level of
But
success.
even, like, you know, when Max wins, it's like, okay, great job, guys, like, but, oh, yeah, like, I'm super happy. You know, with Lewis, it's just a different quality of driver, frankly. The first thing he says is,
Thank you to the team.
thank you to the team, thank you to the factory,
Yeah.
thank you to you guys. It's not about me, like, thank you. And George is the same. And I just, from a cultural perspective, like, I you know, like, Mercedes took P2, P3, but for me, like, they're generally the winners in terms of promoting a team that I think, you know, like, even the fact that they've suddenly unlocked their car, like, that has been, you know, half a season of progressive,
Yeah.
you know, testing things on Hamilton and comparing the cars and maybe sacrificing some things to be able to make better on others, rather than, you know, pulling a white Ferrari or pulling the green Red Bull
A white Ferrari.
or whatever.
Check out our TikTok. There's a great video on the white Ferrari.
Yeah, exactly. Anyways, so that's Mercedes. I think strong weekend. I mean, my highlights of the race is when Toto smirks at the camera. he's like, he knows the camera's there, and he's just, and I think seeing that smile back on his face is great.
It's good to see the Mercedes team happy. Obviously, people were happy not to see them be the most successful in the world this year after they had got 8 years of dominance. But it's nice. It's nice to see Lewis happy. It's nice to see George happy. Because they are. It's like when you see Vettel happy as well. When he's in a good team. And he's successful. Those are the type of drivers you love in F1, and that they've made you fall in love. You either hate them or you love them, but they've done so much for the game, and it's good to see them in a good place.
Exactly. Yeah, and we'll talk about that, right? Like, who's going to replace Vettel and what the predictions are there. But I think, like, moving through the grid a little bit, McLaren.
The Alpine McLaren battle.
Yeah, the Alpine McLaren battle.
Sorry, but today
the team brief in Alpine.
Today wasn't the Alpine versus McLaren battle. It was the Alpine versus Alpine. They decided to. They said they wanted a piece of Ferrari, and Ocon wanted a piece of Ferrari strategy. And be like, I am gonna sabotage this team as the best I can. From the start, he blocked off Alonso
with his defending, and Alonso literally came on the radio. He was like, "In my life, I have never seen anything like this."
And then it happened again when Ricciardo was right behind them, and Ocon was defending from Alonso.
That was unbelievable.
And Ricciardo just
went past. He was just a bit like, okay, bye. Like,
it was great.
And it was good to see.
Through goes Ricciardo.
But I think it was great to see, like, that's a Ricciardo move. You know what I mean? Like,
he's a great overtaker.
That was super cool. But again, what's the point? You fight against your teammate, but you just lost to your competitor.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, it's strange because that Ocon was that aggressive. Firstly, because he has a multi-year contract, so his seat is guaranteed for a while. And you're fourth in the championship.
Well, it's more
you're trying to maximize the team performance to nail down that fourth spot. You don't want to fall back slip, so you can. Increase the amount of revenue you get at the end of the year, because obviously if you finish high in the Constructors' Championship, your team gets more money.
Yeah.
And you can hopefully then develop a better car that can put
especially with the McLarens
closer to the championship.
Having brought those updates and having been quicker this weekend.
Mm-hmm. And it's just such self-sabotage to see him do that and to see the two drivers fighting like that. But it makes no sense.
In the points, Ocon's above.
Yeah, Ocon's above Alonso.
Right, so do you think it's this thing that he's like, I want to be a world champion, or do you think it's ego, or like what happened?
Well, I don't know. Ocon's been very. It could be. There could be a strong element of wishing to be the Fernando Alonso.
But he looks up to Fernando a lot.
There's been several times, but because you look up to him, you want to beat him.
No, but I wouldn't want to piss him off.
No, obviously not.
Continuously.
It was like in I'm trying to think when. I think it was in Jeddah. Second race of the season, it was Ocon was just ahead of Alonso, and they were just going back and forth, and Alonso was being very aggressive, in terms of defending and overtaking and stuff like that. And it just seems like he kicks it into an extra gear when it comes to his teammate, and Alpine seemed very happy to just let them fight,
Yeah, absolutely.
But that's.
But so then with the placements, how is the constructors looking now?
Well, so the gap between because Norris finished 7th and the Alpines finished 8th and 9th. Norris gets 6 points, Ocon gets 4 points, and Alonso gets 2 points. So all in all, both teams get 6 points because Ricciardo, who was having a great race until he hit Stroll, had a 5-second penalty and was out the points. So the gap is still remained. It's still a 4-point gap. Between Alpine and McLaren. Alpine still having the lead. Red Bull still extended their gap even more incredibly somehow when they started 10th and 11th over Ferrari. I think the
you
championship.
start wondering, it's like, well, what could they have done if they were on the front row? But we know this, like they made the most of that situation.
And then Mercedes is closing the gap to Ferrari
I think now it's a fight between Mercedes and Ferrari for
second place. And if
I don't think first is.
out of all the progress Ferrari have made since last year to this year, they got much faster
Yeah.
car. They have a car that's fast enough to compete for both championships. You
Yeah.
know, to then potentially falling back to third, because Mercedes obviously now have the summer break, and obviously Ferrari has a summer break as well.
But Mercedes.
What if Mercedes get on top of their car and they understand it a lot more, and so they come back and we've got a race winning car, you know? The gap is only 30 points in terms of constructors. And George has overtaken Sainz in the drivers' championship. So, you know, and if it happens, Ferrari can only blame
so he's
themselves.
third now.
Fourth.
George is fourth. Okay, and Sainz is fifth, and then
Hamilton sixth,
Yeah,
Norris seventh,
okay, cool.
and Ocon eighth, I think.
yeah,
you know?
I mean, let's see, right? But
I think finally
this is where we are. Like, we're halfway through the season, and we thought it
Yeah.
would be a battle for first, and it's not. Now it's a battle
No,
for
second and
second.
third. You know, Ferrari have given away that
but,
championship.
But you gotta laugh at it, right? Like, considering how bad Mercedes' car was
Yeah.
at the beginning of the season, and how much faster. Like, we're talking massive gaps.
Seconds.
And the fact that that Hamilton has the same amount of podiums as Leclerc this
You have to
season.
feel bad for Leclerc, man,
I
because he
feel
has been.
awful for him.
You know, we documented on some of the mistakes he's made in Imola and as well last week at the French GP. You know.
Yeah, it was 2 mistakes.
But you know, he's been fantastic this year, and you know, if you probably look at the points he's lost from mistakes and the points
Yeah.
that he's lost because of team mistakes, reliability, and strategy, you know, they've still lost a lot more through the team.
Yeah.
And it's just it's such a
I
shame
mean-
because he's been fantastic.
Yeah.
He's taken such a step forward this year.
But they came into this race, Benotto was like, I want 1 and 2. I'm like, okay, well, work for 1 and 2 then. Don't
There's
do what
no.
you did.
I think
So it is what it is, and I think we've kind of beat this to the ground. I don't think we
Yeah.
just talk. I think everybody's talking about
Yeah.
how Ferrari has no strategy. Like, it is what it is. I think it's more like what's best case scenario
Yeah.
for them now. I think the driver championship is out of reach.
Yeah, I think constructors
Let's
championship's
see,
out of reach.
second for constructors. Like, I don't know.
they unless Max comes back and starts DNFing because of reliability or even more unlikely because he starts making mistakes and he looks like he's, you know, this is the best he's ever driven. So I can't really see that happening.
No.
You know, we'll have to see. Ferrari is out of their control now.
Yeah.
But I also think the last thing I want to touch on is another Aston Martin P10
Yeah.
that they have again. Terrible qualifying pace, you know.
Because they started in.
Vettel got to P10 and Lance was finished P11. Lance made it to Q2. He started 13, 14.
Yeah.
And Vettel was out in Q1. So he was
Because
around
of that problem
17,
that he
16.
had in FP3. Yeah.
But still, they seem to just have really consistent,
Race
solid
pace.
race pace.
Yeah.
It's better than those other teams at the back, you know.
The Williams and the Haas.
The Williams and Williams is, you can't even talk about Williams anymore.
Haas, and AlphaTauri
AlphaTauri
are
is
just not in the game.
they're not in the game.
Yeah.
Well, Haas are in the game. You know, I love me the signership. You know, I think this week wasn't a great.
Do you think they were testing their upgrades?
Well, yeah, they're testing. Well, they had a great start.
Yeah.
Because they started 13th and 15th, I believe. And then, you know, as soon as the race kicked off, Magnussen was up in 10th. I think Schumacher was in 11th. But then Magnussen had damage. And then you know, he had to pit. He had wing damage. The black and orange flag came out. And then they pitted him, and then obviously stuck him in the hard tyres. And,
that didn't work.
That killed his
What
race.
happened with Schumacher?
I think he just... I don't think his car was very competitive, you know.
Oh, but like the upgrades are just with Magnussen anyway.
Yeah, so I think obviously they have to understand it. And Magnussen, Haas have adopted the approach where, you know, it's quite a smart approach considering the financial situation they're in. They don't have as much money as, you know, their competitors. That they've gained lap time this year without upgrading their car. Without, you know, major upgrades, just for understanding their car and tuning it track for track. So they could honestly
F1 on a budget.
You know, I mean, it's true, but honestly, they
The
could
Steiner
have
system.
they could have one of the deepest understandings out of any of the teams of their car because they haven't touched it. So they've gone.
Mic drop. How to run an economically
11, 12.
efficient F1 team. So you can just the Steiner
Love
ship.
Love
F1
Gunter.
economics.
Love Gunter.
Understanding your car.
But yeah, I think they have a very good understanding of their car, and I'm excited. They're gonna look at the data obviously that they got today on Magnussen's car. They have the whole summer break to work on it.
Yeah. Understand your car. Understand your life.
Exactly. I'm excited about the Haas team.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Hopefully he's having more pleasant calls with
Gene.
With Gene, 100%. I think those are kind of all the teams that had moments this race and that we saw momentum from. The only thing is this rear wing question with the Aston Martin
team.
Basically, key topic of debate is like it produces
TikTok video about it coming out soon.
Yeah, it produces dirty air. It's a lot like last year's one, but technically it's fine. So it's more like people are debating essentially like, can the FIA ban it? Because even though it's technically fine, it goes against the spirit of the actual regulations themselves. Or should it not be banned because F1 is about innovation and you can't stifle innovation and that's part of the sport, etc., etc. I kind of argue like, look at the racing we have today, look at how closely cars can follow. You can innovate without innovating against the spirit of the racing. Because you can imagine, let's say Red Bull bringing a rear wing like that, and again that gap just keeps extending and overtaking is difficult. It wouldn't work.
I don't think it's as polarizing because it's Aston Martin. Because they're back.
They just turn up sometimes.
They turn up. They finish. They start 17th on the grid. They'll sneak a P10 in. They add one extra point. Close that gap to Haas by 1 point each race weekend. No one really. It's not. But then
it's all part of Lawrence Stroll's 5-year strategy.
5-year strategy. But then if a bigger team, if a Red Bull, a Mercedes, a Ferrari
it would have
adopted
been more contentious. Yeah.
And you could suddenly. There would be a massive debate about it because also those top three teams, they're always caught in a massive political battle between each other because they're all trying to influence rule changes that will hopefully be beneficial towards their teams and or be less beneficial, be harmful towards the other team's track performances. But because it's an Aston Martin and they're not very competitive, unfortunately.
And who do we think is going to replace Vettel? I think it's going to be an F2 driver.
It's going to be someone young. I think it makes sense. I think Ricciardo wants to be in a race-winning car.
I don't think
so. I think he's closer to that at McLaren than at Aston Martin. Maybe he gets sick of perhaps the slightly more comparison with Lando, toxic environment. If he goes to Aston Martin, he has to compete with Lance, who is obviously a much less talented driver. I don't think it makes sense. Gasly, unfortunately, maybe
has a contract.
He jumped the gun, maybe signing his extension with Alpha Tauri.
You've got Piastri.
Piastri's an option.
I don't think any IndyCar drivers are going to come. They're suggesting from McLaren.
Nick De Vries an option.
Yeah. Maybe someone from the W Series. That could be cool. Jamie Chadwick. Just plug that in.
Or else, it's going to be someone in F2. A Schwartzman, a driver.
What about their reserve drivers?
It's Hulkenberg.
Oh no.
And,
okay. Fair enough.
I think Hulkenberg unfortunately missed his window. He never got his podium. Never got a win. Yeah. Missed his window.
Good reserve driver.
I guess.
Well, what do we think is going to happen in the second half of this season? Big things to come.
I don't know. I just pray for. I just need a Lewis win.
I want George to get podiums.
George to get a win.
And I want Lewis to get wins. Yeah.
I mean, ideally, I'd love Ferrari to close the gap. To somehow get on top of their shit. Start closing the gap because you want, as a spectator, you want a competitive championship battle. Obviously this year's been very entertaining with the new regulations. Last year was fantastic, but
last year was more exciting.
I think in Formula
One between the teams.
Yeah.
I think this year's more exciting because.
But this year it's
Yeah, but on another positive note that I think I didn't see coming is obviously. F1, Formula One have finally issued a campaign against abuse to other people. So
Yeah.
I think it all kind of prompted by the Austrian Grand Prix. And yeah, I'm happy to see it. I think often sometimes words are said and no actions are fulfilled. And a lot of the initiatives, whether in climate change or, you know, Black Lives Matter or whatever it might be, are prompted by drivers, aka Vettel, aka Hamilton, more than it is by the institution. And I think, you know, like, I was quite pleased to see that they've actually taken ownership of this. And I mean, it's a campaign, like, I don't see any actions behind it just yet, but yeah. Another thing to note though about this Grand Prix that I heard from people that were there, very similar to Barcelona, very similar to Austria, the customer experience sucked. It sucked really bad. Like, same issues as always. Not enough toilets, too hot, not accessibility to water, transport systems are not good. I think considering how much you pay for an F1 ticket, and considering you're spraying champagne on the podiums, and it's this really like upscale sport,
extravagant,
it's crazy to me that they have not improved or innovated their customer experience, considering they are a team about innovation, an institution about innovation. So yeah, our lights have just gone off. There we go. The lights are back on.
Is it clapping?
I don't know. I clapped and it turned back on. I think on that note, that's maybe a good time to exit.
Yeah.
Before the lights turn off again.
Thank you guys for listening.
Yeah, thank you for listening.
Follow us on Instagram. Subscribe to our
TikTok.
YouTube channel. TikTok, LinkedIn.
If LinkedIn's your vibe,
Twitter,
we're there.
follow Twitter.
Yeah. I think
They're all fine margins.
Yeah, if you want super quick recaps and you don't have the time to listen to us Babylon for
TikTok's
an hour, TikTok, we
Instagram,
basically do what we do here in 30 seconds. Instagram is all the kind of latest updates. Twitter, we like memes. And LinkedIn is really, you know, for those OG fans that want to go the extra mile. That's my side of the business. So that's it. Thank you very much. We will be coming kind of with you to the bigger questions, like the thematic pieces.
During some
There's
breaks.
a lot of questions that need to be answered in F1 that it's kind of the reason we started this podcast. So expect those to be coming during the break. And have a great...
Thank you guys.
Thank you so much.